So welcome to 15 Minutes with Miramos Media Production with NetGalley. And today we're here with Jonathan Stroud, New York Times best-selling author of fantasy fiction, graduate of University of York in England, and an author of many books. His first book, the Lockwood and Company series, began in 2013, and today we're discussing the fifth book in that series, The Empty Grave. So hello, Jonathan, and welcome to 15 Minutes.
Oh, thank you very much. It's lovely to be with you.
You and I spoke before about your first actual publication at 8. It was a self-published book that you did. And tell me again about that experience and what that was like for you and why you wanted to publish the book at that age.
Well, it's a good question actually, because and I can't really answer it. I mean, I think why does anyone do anything? I've always had an itch to make books and to tell stories, and I suppose the sort of deepest answer is that as a kid, I loved hearing other people's stories, watching things on TV, watching movies, and I kind of had this itch inside me to do my own. So, as you mentioned, when I was about 8 years old, I made this little book here, which you can just about see in all its glory, and it was made on lots of little pieces of lined paper, which I stuck together with glue. I don't know whether you can see it, but the glue's gone brown with age. That's how old this book is. And my dad stuck this little green cover on it, and we put it in a clamp and fixed it overnight. And in the morning, I came down and got it out, and I can still remember that sense of real triumph that I had made a book with a cover, and it's a detective story, because that was what I was into at the time. And I suppose that's the point. You know, you try to, something excites you and you try and do your own version. And I'm still doing that today, I guess.
Yeah. And so your first book was a series, and what we're discussing today is part of a series. When did you know that you were going to write serials? When did you realize that this was going to be your thing, that you were really good at writing books that were part of a series?
Well, it's probably because I never know when to shut up. Actually, you start with a story. I think all authors will agree that when you start off, you just have the kernel of an idea. It's a little thing which excites you, and then you start to write, and you slowly build it up and outwards. And as you go, it's like kind of making a pearl or something. You slowly build it up layer by layer. At some point, you have to make a decision. Where is it going to go? Where is it going to stop? And I discovered, not with all my books, but with some of them, I discovered that actually what I really loved was inventing a whole world with all these rules and all these different things that might happen. And often that was just too big to fit into one single book. It would get too complicated to try and cram it all in. And it takes time also as a writer. You don't see the whole world straight off. You understand a bit of it, but the rest of it's kind of blurry, and you have to kind of write your way into it to discover it. So with the Lockwood books, and as you say, I will just hold it up. There it is, The Empty Grave, which is book 5.
Right.
When I was writing this in the last year, there were things in here that I didn't know until I got there. I've been writing it for 5-6 years. There were things that were a mystery to me, and I knew that the answer was there, but I had to just slowly uncover it. And just like my characters were uncovering the mysteries in the story, I was having to figure out these things too, and that kind of keeps it exciting for me as a creator, that there are always new things that I'm uncovering.
Yeah, and that's got to be exciting, because you go through the whole process of writing a book, and then you write something about one of your characters, and you're like, let me explore that, but I'm almost 20 pages left in this book. Maybe I can explore that in the next book, right?
That's absolutely right. It means you don't. If you've got a series, it means you don't have to hurry. You don't suddenly sort of fudge it and I'll just tell their story in a couple of pages, cram it in. You can take your time. I mean, there's a danger obviously that you could end up just writing too much and making it flabby and the structure could get all sort of loose. Obviously, you've got to guard against that. But if you treat each book as a kind of quite a tight thing, construction with its own beginning, middle, and end, then you can make that one work. Then you can do the next one, and you can bring a different character to the fore or whatever. As long as you keep in control,
right.
It's a very liberating thing to have a series of books. And I feel a bit exhausted after 5 books, but also really happy that I feel like I've really done my best by that world. I've really explored it as well as I could.
Well, let's talk about this latest book. Like we said, it's the 5th in the series. What inspired you to write the 5th book, and what do you think that readers are going to get from it that they may not have gotten from the other 4?
Oh, well, a good question. One word, answers, because the setup with Lockwood and Co. it's basically ghost stories. It's ghost stories. It's my heroes are children who have to deal with ghosts. There's an epidemic of these phantoms in London. Everyone knows they're there. The adults can't deal with it because they're a bit rubbish. They can't see ghosts or hear them. So the kids have to deal with it. And so through the series, they've been going and investigating all kinds of different spooky cases. But there's been an underlying question, a mystery. Why are these ghosts turning up? What's causing it? What's the sort of conspiracy or underlying sinister thing going on? Which I've hinted at in different books, but only in book 5, which I of course urge everyone to buy. That's the book where you find out most of the answers.
Do you think that there will be a 6th book, or do you think that your readers are going to get some kind of closure with this one that you could probably wait several years before you pop up with something new?
Yeah, again, it comes back to structure again. I think as a writer, one of your obligations is you've got to wrap things up properly. I don't think you should. You can leave certain things hanging maybe, but really if you're going to sow all these mysteries, you have to give some closure to your readers. So I think there is a bit of closure in this book. I do think that the door is left open for me to explore my characters further, perhaps down the line, because I do love them. I mean, that's the other thing about a series. You come to love your characters. You spend so much time with them over the years. They're like close friends. So I'm sure I would certainly not rule out visiting these guys again in some form. But I do feel that this 5-book series is kind of like quite a nice entity, in itself.
Well, you mentioned earlier when you were talking about this book that your main characters are children, and that the adults, the children see these ghosts. They're trying to figure out why they're there, but the adults don't really get it. Do you think that you would ever visit these characters as adults who may have lost that ability?
Oh, well, that's a great question, because you're right. They're teenagers, really. The characters. When we first meet them in book 1, they're about 12, 13, 14. And by the end, they're probably closer to about 17. So they've moved up, but potentially they will lose their psychic abilities, within a few years. And actually, it would be very interesting to visit them again in a different book, and perhaps in a different way, observing how they deal with that particular loss. How as they actually become adult. I think that would be a slightly different kind of book, but I'm sure I could do it because again I know these characters quite well now, so I could. You give me a good idea now. I'll have to go away and make a few notes after the interview, sort of see where I go with that.
Yeah, think about that. So, what direction do you think you'll take in your next book? With every writer, there's always another book. There's always, whether it comes out or not, there's always something you're writing, right?
It's so true. I've got a big shelf of files in my office, and there are the files with ideas, and sometimes they're just like, I don't know if you have this, but you sometimes you have little scraps of an idea, like just a page or a few lines. Other times it might be something that I'd started a few years ago, and didn't quite work, or I couldn't quite figure out where it was going. So I'm quite looking forward actually now to going back and blowing the dust off these files and picking one of these one of these stories. And they're different genres. Some are fantasy, some are science fiction, others maybe neither. I'm quite excited actually that I could, at this point, I could do anything. I have to make that choice, and obviously then you start to narrow your focus and go down a certain road. But yeah, it's all to play for.
Yeah, so now you have that kind of freedom, and you can just, all the options are open to you.
It's funny, isn't it? As a writer, you at that moment where you've got a blank page, and the possibilities are infinite. You could do anything, and that's a kind of really exciting, but also kind of terrifying. And you, at some point, you've got to go, all right, and you go for it, and you start making something, and you can feel all the doors closing as you sort of go down one path. But at the moment, it's the delight in having any different direction to travel down.
Well, speaking of writing, I'll get to my final question. It is about the process of writing. We do have a lot of readers who are going to watch this and they're going to go pick up The Empty Grave, but we also have a lot of writers who watch our show, watch our author chats, our 15 Minutes With, and they want tips on how to navigate the process of writing. One of the things that you've said is that you make it a point to write every day.
Yeah, that's true. That is true. I mean, it's. I'm sure that most people have some technique that they use to try and get over the problem, because time is the main problem. You've got family life, you've got your jobs, you've got careers, you've got commitments. Everyone has this problem, and for me, the thing I had to learn, the first discipline really was putting a few minutes aside every day. Even when I had a full-time job, doing something else, I would try and write before I went to work, or I'd try in the evening. I'd try and do a little bit, and it's easier said than done. Obviously, usually you're tired, but just getting a few things down is always so good, because you once it's there, you can never get rid of it. You can go back to it, you can play with it, you can change it. It doesn't have to be brilliant, but by getting it down, you start that process. You put a brick on the wall, and you know eventually you can build something beautiful and tall. It's like exercise, isn't it? It's like going for a run. You feel it's raining outside, and you don't want to go for a jog, but if you do it, then you immediately get this burst of endorphins afterwards. Life is good. Right. It's the same with writing. You just get into that little habit, and you just build it up. And enjoy it. You've got to experiment. That's the other thing. Play around with it. Have fun. If you're enjoying it, then the chances are that your readers will enjoy it too. And
that's it. Thank you so much, Jonathan, for accommodating me today and joining me with 15 Minutes With. I enjoyed talking with you about the book. The book is The Empty Grave. Please go get it. It's going to be a wonderful way to kind of wrap up that series, possibly. So, right?
You heard it here first.
Thank you so much.
It's a great pleasure. Thank you for having me. Bye.
Bye.